Take a look at my hands. Go ahead, look at M. They're covered in scars, grease that'll never fully come out, and knuckles that have met more than a few hard surfaces over the years. People see these hands and they see a fighter. They see a biker. And they see someone they'd rather not run into in a dark alley. But these hands also know how to be gentle. They know how to fix a broken toy for a kid, and they sure as hell know how to hold a throttle with respect. You see, out here on the road, we live by a code. It's simple, really. You don't mess with family, and you don't mess with kids, and you damn sure don't mess with the elderly. Because every old man you see was once a warrior, and every old woman you see is someone's mother, and someone's grandmother, the heartbeat of a home that was built long before we're even a thought in your father's head. But lately, and I've noticed the world is losing its way. People have become obsessed with the old and in with the new. They look at a person with silver hair and they don't see wisdom. They see an obstacle. And they see property value. They see a relic. And that brings me to Mrs. Eleanor. Eleanor is 91 years old. Think about that. And she was born when the world was a completely different place. She's seen the best of us and the worst of us. And she's the kind of lady who still wears a floral apron when she's baking, even if it's just for herself. And she's got these bright blue eyes that have wept 1,000 tears, but still managed to find a way to twinkle when she sees a butterfly in her garden. She lives in a small and white clapboard house on the corner of 5th and Oak. It's not a mansion. It's not some modern glass box. It's a home. Her husband, Bill, God rest his soul, and was a brother in spirit, if not in patches. He was a mechanic in the big war, a man who could fix a tank with a paperclip and a prayer. When he came home, and he bought that lot with every cent he'd saved, and he spent 3 years building that house for Eleanor. He didn't just build walls, he built a fortress of love, and he hand-carved the banisters. He laid every stone in the walkway. And the roses. Those roses were Eleanor's pride and joy. And Bill planted the first bush on the day they moved in, back in 1960. Every year after, on their anniversary, he'd plant another one. Red, white, yellow, and the whole yard was a symphony of color every spring. It was their love story, written in petals and thorns. Bill's been gone 10 years now, and ever since he left, and Eleanor has been the keeper of that story. She's out there every morning, even when her back is aching and her knees are stiff, and pulling weeds and talking to the flowers like Bill is standing right there next to her. For her, that garden isn't just dirt and plants. It's Bill's heartbeat, and it's the last place on this green earth where she can still feel his hand on her shoulder. But then, the world moved in, or rather, the suit moved in. His name was Kevin, and Kevin was 40 years old, drove a car that cost more than Eleanor's whole house, and looked at people like they were numbers on a spreadsheet. And he bought the Craftsman house next door. He didn't want to live there, and he wanted to maximize the footprint. He tore down a house that had stood for 80 years in 2 days, replaced it with a gray concrete cube, and then he turned his eyes toward Eleanor's yard. He didn't see a 91-year-old widow's sanctuary, and he saw encroachment. He saw a cedar fence that was a few inches off a survey line. He saw rose bushes that were too wild and dropping petals on his driveway. And I was rolling by last Tuesday. The sun was hitting the chrome on my bike, and I was just enjoying the breeze, headed down to the clubhouse to see the boys. But then I heard it, a voice so loud and so ugly it cut right through the rumble of my engine. I slowed down. I pulled over to the curb idling, and what I saw made my blood turn to liquid fire. There was Kevin. He was standing on Eleanor's lawn, his shiny leather loafers crushing the petunias she'd just planted, and he was towering over her. Eleanor was standing there in her little knitted cardigan, her hands tucked into her pockets, looking up at him like a sparrow looking at a hawk, and Kevin was screaming. His face was a nasty, bloated shade of purple. He was waving a folder full of legal papers in her face, shaking them so hard they were rattling. And I've had the survey done, Eleanor, he barked. This fence is 6 inches over the line. These bushes are a public nuisance, and they're dropping debris on my property and attracting bees. Do you have any idea what this eyesore is doing to my resale value? And people don't want to buy $1 million home next to a grandmother's overgrown jungle. Eleanor's voice was so small, I could barely hear it over the idle of my bike. But sir, Bill planted these. The fence, it's been there since the 60s. Nobody ever had a problem. Kevin let out a laugh that was cold enough to kill a summer day. And Bill is dead. He's been in the ground a decade, and he's not coming back to save this dump. You're a relic, Eleanor. You're living in the past, and you're in my way. And I've got a crew coming on Monday morning. If you haven't torn this fence down and cleared these weeds by then, I'm gonna have the bulldozer do it for you, and I'll clear the whole lot and send you the bill. Try me. See if I care." He actually pointed his finger right in her face, almost touching her nose, and Eleanor didn't yell back. She didn't scream. She just bowed her head. Her shoulders started to shake. She was crying, silent, and heavy tears that fell onto the very soil Bill had worked so hard to give her. Kevin didn't even flinch. He just turned around, checked his gold watch, and then walked back into his gray concrete box, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. I sat there on my bike for a long time. My knuckles were white, and gripping the bars so hard I thought the metal might snap. I watched Eleanor walk slowly back to her porch, her head down, her heart clearly breaking in two, and she thought she was alone. She thought that because she didn't have a son or a grandson left in this town, she had to just take it, and she thought the world belonged to guys like Kevin now. Well, she was wrong. Kevin bought the house next door, but he didn't check the neighborhood registry, and he didn't know that every Saturday for the last 5 years, the motor mafia has been rolling past this corner, and he didn't know that we've been watching over Eleanor since the day Bill passed. He thought he was picking on a lonely old woman, and he didn't realize he just picked a fight with 50 of the meanest, loudest, most loyal brothers on the East Coast. And if you're sitting there right now and your blood is boiling as hot as mine, I want you to do something. I want you to hit that like button. Not for me, for Eleanor. And I want you to flood the comments with respect and show this world that we don't let our grandmothers stand alone in the dirt. Show me you've got a backbone. And because Monday morning is coming, and Kevin is about to get a wake-up call he'll never forget. That weekend at the clubhouse, the air was thick. Usually, it's all laughs, and the sound of pool balls clinking, and the smell of stale beer and burnt rubber. But not that night. I told the brothers what I saw. I told them about Kevin's purple face, and his shiny shoes on Eleanor's flowers, and the way she looked, so small and so defeated, when he told her Bill's legacy was just trash. The room went dead silent, and Biggs stopped mid-sip. Hammer put down his wrench. When you've spent your life on the road, you develop a certain kind of radar for injustice. We aren't saints, but we have a line. And Kevin, he didn't just cross it, he danced on it. Monday morning, I said, my voice low, 6:00 a.m. No patches unless you want but bring the noise. Every bit of it. Sunday night felt like the night before a raid. I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about Eleanor sitting in that quiet house, and probably looking at old photos of Bill, wondering if she should just give up and let the bulldozer take the roses. The thought made my gut ache. Monday morning, 5:45 a.m., and the sun hadn't even broken the horizon yet. The sky was that bruised shade of purple, cold and biting. I kicked my shovel head to life, and one by one, and the neighborhood started to hum. We met at the staging point 2 blocks away. No music, no shouting. Just the steady, rhythmic thumping of 50 heavy-duty V-twin engines, and it sounded like a giant's heartbeat. We rolled onto 5th Street exactly at 6:10 a.m. Kevin was already out there. He was wearing a high-end tracksuit, holding a clipboard, and talking to 3 guys in a white pickup truck. They had a bobcat on a trailer and a pile of orange cones. He looked like he was about to win a war, and he was pointing at Eleanor's fence, giving orders like he was a damn general. Then, he heard us. At first, it was just a vibration in the soles of his feet, and you could see him frown, looking around confused. Then the roar hit. We didn't come in fast. We came in at a crawl. A wall of black steel and chrome, and stretching from curb to curb. I was at the lead, Biggs on my left, Hammer on my right. We filled the entire street. We didn't just park, we occupied. And I pulled my bike up until my front tire was practically touching the bumper of the contractor's truck. 50 kickstands dropped at the exact same time. Clack, and it sounded like a bolt-action rifle chambering around. We didn't get off the bikes. Not yet. We just sat there, engines idling. And if you've never been in the middle of 50 straight, piped Harleys in a narrow residential street, you can't imagine the pressure. It's not just noise, and it's a physical force. It rattles your teeth. It makes it impossible to think. Kevin's smug little smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. He looked at the sea of leather, and the bearded faces, the cold eyes behind dark shades. He looked at the bikes, then at his clipboard, then back at us. And his knees actually did that little wobble you only see in movies. I waited. I let the noise do the talking for 3 full minutes, and I wanted him to feel every decibel in his chest. Then, I cut my engine. One by one, the brothers followed. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the roar, and it was heavy, suffocating. I stood up, kicked my stand, and walked toward the property line. I didn't go toward Kevin. I walked right up to Eleanor's gate, and she was standing behind her screen door, her eyes wide, clutching a dish towel. I gave her a slow, respectful nod. Morning, Mrs. E, I called out, and my voice carrying easily in the dead air. Heard you were thinking of doing some renovations. The boys and I had some free time, and so we figured we'd come by and keep the neighborhood secure. You don't mind if we hang out on your lawn, do you? She didn't say anything, and she just let out a breath she'd been holding since Tuesday and gave me the tiniest, most beautiful smile I've ever seen. Kevin finally found his legs, and he stepped off his porch, his face pale as a ghost. What? What is this? This is an illegal assembly. I have work to do here. Get these things off the street. And I turned around slow. Real slow, I walked over to where he was standing, stopping just inside the line of his driveway. I'm a big guy, but I made sure I looked 10 feet tall right then. Listen close, Kevin, I said, my voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that only he could hear. And these things are my family. And that lady you called a relic, she's our family too. Now you told her you were bringing a bulldozer. I don't see a bulldozer, and I see a little bobcat. And I see 3 guys in a truck who look like they anywhere else on earth than right here. I glanced over at the contractors, and they were already unhooking the trailer, but they weren't unloading. They were hooking it back up to the truck. They weren't stupid, and they knew a no-go zone. When they saw one, you have a choice. I continued, leaning in until I could smell the expensive moisturizer on his face. And you can try to move those cones. You can try to touch a single splinter of that fence or one petal of those roses. But if you do, and 40 of my brothers are going to start their bikes back up, and we won't stop we'll stay here, we'll have a party, and we'll rev until your windows crack and your resale value drops to 0, because nobody wants to live next to a permanent biker rally, and you want to play the property value game. I've got 50 ways to win it, and you won't like a single one of them? Kevin looked at the contractors. Hey, I'm paying you? And get to work. The lead contractor, a burly guy with a gray beard, just shook his head. Forget it, pal. Contracts void. Hazardous work environment. Keep the deposit. And we're out of here. They jumped in the cab and peeled out, leaving Kevin standing there alone in his driveway, holding a clipboard that didn't mean a damn thing anymore. And he looked at me, his lip quivering. You can't stay here forever. Maybe not, I said, lighting a cigarette and blowing the smoke right over his head. But we can stay a lot longer than you can hold your breath. And we've got a lot of friends, Kevin. A lot of friends. And if you're cheering inside, because that smug look finally left Kevin's face, I need you to show some love. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. And we're just getting started. This isn't just about stopping a bulldozer. It's about making sure this bully never even thinks about raising his voice to a grandmother again. And stick around for the final part. You're gonna love the permanent solution we have for our friend Kevin. The standoff lasted through the afternoon, and Kevin retreated into his gray concrete fortress. But he couldn't shut out the world. Every time he looked out his window, he didn't see a property asset, and he saw a wall of black leather and chrome. He saw Hammer and Biggs playing a game of cards on the sidewalk. He saw me sitting on his curb, leaning against his mailbox, and just watching the front door. By sunset, the local news had caught wind of it. A camera crew showed up, but they didn't find a riot, and they found 50 bikers helping a 91-year-old widow carry her groceries inside. And they found us pruning the very rose bushes Kevin called weeds. The story shifted from biker gang takes over street to community protects local legend. Kevin was becoming a villain in real time, and the pressure was cooking him alive. Wednesday morning, the white flag finally went up. Kevin's front door opened, and he stepped out, and he wasn't the same guy who had been screaming a week ago. He looked small. He looked tired. His expensive tracksuit was wrinkled, and his eyes were bloodshot. And he walked down his driveway, his feet dragging in the gravel, and stopped at the property line where I was waiting. What do you want? He asked, and his voice barely a whisper. I've called the city. I've called the precinct. Nobody will move you. Just tell me what it takes for you to leave. I stood up, and taking my time, and brushed the dust off my jeans. It's not about us leaving, Kevin. It's about you changing. And you thought you could buy a neighborhood and just delete the people in it. You thought Eleanor was just a nuisance because she didn't have a lawyer. Well, and she's got 50 of 'em now, and we don't bill by the hour. I pointed to the fence the one Bill had built. That fence stays. But it's old. The wood is rotting. And those roses. They've been through a lot of stress because of you. I pulled a folded piece of paper out of my vest. It wasn't a legal document, it was a list. And here's the deal. You're gonna hire the best restoration crew in the state, not the cheap guys you had on Monday. You're going to pay for a new cedar fence and crafted to look exactly like the one Bill built, but reinforced so it'll stand for another 100 years. You're going to set it back 2 feet onto your property, and a gift of land to Mrs. Eleanor, recorded at the county office, so no one can ever question her borders again. And you're going to pay for a master gardener to come here every month for the next 5 years to keep those roses blooming. Kevin looked at the list, and the cost alone was going to hurt. He opened his mouth to argue, but I just glanced back at the brothers. Hammer revved his engine, a short and sharp bark of thunder that echoed off Kevin's glass walls. And one more thing, I said, my voice turning cold. You're going to walk up to that porch, and you're going to look her in the eye, and you're going to apologize. And it better be the most sincere thing that's ever come out of your mouth. He didn't hesitate, and he was broken. He walked over to Eleanor's porch, where she was sitting in her rocking chair, watching the world go by. We all stood behind him, a silent and heavy semicircle of brothers. Kevin looked at her, really looked at Eleanor. He started, his voice shaking. I was a bad neighbor, and I forgot that a home is more than just a house. I'm sorry for what I said about your husband, and I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I'm going to make it right, and I promise. Eleanor didn't yell. She didn't gloat. She just reached out and took his hand. Her skin looked like fine china against his. And God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, young man, she said softly. And you should try listening to the stories this ground has to tell before you try to pave over them. And Bill always said a man's character is built by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. Kevin actually nodded, I think, for the first time in his life, and he felt the weight of someone else's history. We stayed until the last nail was driven into that new fence. And we stayed until the gardener had fed the roses and Eleanor's yard looked like a dream. Kevin eventually sold his house, at a loss, I heard, and moved back to the city. And he realized he wasn't cut out for a neighborhood where people actually give a damn about each other. Now, every Saturday morning, the motor mafia rolls down 5th Street, and we don't roar past anymore. We slow down to a crawl. We give a short, respectful tap on our horns. And there she is, sitting on that porch and waving at us like we're her own flesh and blood. To some, we're outlaws. To some, we're the guys you lock your doors for. But to Eleanor, and we're the reason Bill's roses are still reaching for the sun. This story isn't just about a fence or a bully. It's a reminder. Respect isn't something you buy, and it's something you give. And as long as there's an Eleanor out there being pushed around by a Kevin, you can bet the motor mafia will be moving in next door. And share this story with someone who needs to remember that no one stands alone. Tell your mother you love her. Check on your neighbors. And never, and ever forget where you came from. This is Jax, signing off.